January 8th, 2009. We're at the William Hitt Center in Tijuana, Mexico. Okay. I'm Dr. John Humiston.
And I'm Dennis Richard, and Dr. Humiston has consented to go over his Candida protocol with me. I've had it on my website now for some time. I've got personal experience with it as I used this myself more than 2 years ago. Give us some background on your Candida program and protocol.
Well, the Candida protocols is something that developed in our practice because first of all, I ended up finding out that I had Candida myself. I was one of those children who had lots of penicillin as a child, earaches, tonsillitis, had my tonsils out at age 7 or 8, and was given lots of antibiotics. Did some swimming in chlorinated pools, which also happens to figure in. Things that decrease your bacterial flora, and you start replacing it with a fungal flora. And we end up calling that Candida. At any rate, I think my health was fairly good, or thought it was fairly good, until I was just over 40 years old. And I swore I wasn't going to turn 40 and have problems. And sure enough, halfway into my 41st year, I started having cold feet and being somewhat irritable. Memory started slipping. Didn't feel as sharp. Things seemed a little bit too hard. Waking up in the middle of the night with sweating, my heart racing, negative thoughts about 1 or 2 in the morning. Things that had never happened before were now happening on a regular and increasing basis. And I had no idea what that was. Eventually I started feeling rather despondent, I call it, which is feeling just kind of empty, not necessarily depressed, really not feeling much of anything. Irritable, not seeing the point in things, and you feel like an empty shell walking around. That's how some people experience it, and that's how I experience life. This is what really happened, for no apparent reason. And this went on for about 2.5 years. It happened at a time of significant job stress, finishing out my Navy time, which was a very good time, except for there was a period where it was difficult. And that may have contributed, I'm not sure. But the point is, health changed, and it was for no apparent reason, and it wasn't good. Eventually I ended up working at the William Hitt Center, and one of my patients, after I'd been here about a year, who was a very accomplished young man named DeVoe, who had really taught himself about these types of issues, said to me, I know what you have. I had it too. And he used the past tense had, meaning it's gone now. And I said, well, what do I have? And he said, man, you've got yeast. And I had heard of yeast before, Candida, but I didn't really have a true appreciation of what it is. I was taught that dying cancer patients might have it, or people with bad AIDS, very advanced AIDS, maybe old men in nursing homes, but nobody else. And that's not the case. That's what I was taught, but it's not true. I had Candida. Well, I followed him right down to the pharmacy and said, what do I take? And it was started on some antifungals, and I felt better. And that started our learning into what Candida really is. Eventually we found better medications. Natural medications turn out to work better than anything available in the pharmaceutical department right now. And we found that was very helpful, very helpful. And we were introduced to a very well worked out diet by Dr. Bruce Seaman, a child psychiatrist with a PhD in clinical nutrition, who actually ranked foods according to how much they truly contribute to Candida problems. And it really blows away the assumptions that it's all sugar. It's not sugar. Apples are worse than sugar. Soy sauce is worse than sugar. Cheddar cheese is worse than sugar. Fermented things essentially are your big enemies there. And this really clarified the diet aspect. And then we added a very effective probiotic on there. And in the last 4.5 years, we've treated nearly 1,400 patients for Candida, I being one of them. And for many people, it's a life changer when they end up having these symptoms that are just overwhelming them.
I know that you put me on this, it would be it was 2 years ago, the 1st of October last year. So within days, all my cravings were gone. I was shocked. The first time in my life I remember not having food cravings, and it was no longer a problem dieting. I could not lose weight. I mean, my whole life I've been fighting food cravings, and I could go on a diet and last maybe 30 days. I could lose as much as 30 pounds, and then I'd turn around and gain back 35. And so consequently, shortly before we met, I was over 300 pounds. And then from the time I finished your protocol, and over the following 6 months, I dropped an additional 60 pounds. I am now down to the exact weight I was when I got out of the Marine Corps when I was 20 years old, and the same size waist I have it when I was 20 years old.
Wow.
And that's, I contribute the weight loss to your Candida protocol.
Good.
And the actual, I'm still not 100% sure of all the different things that in the last 6 months alone, I have gone from a 42 waist to a 36 waist with no more weight loss at all.
Mm-hmm.
So there's other things that I'll be talking about as I evaluate for sure just what all made that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the most one of the biggest impacts of my life was the Candida program.
Yeah.
That allowed me to get over the food cravings.
But it does do that. And when you say food cravings, do you recall which foods you were craving?
Well, for chocolate, sweets. I loved Marie Callender's pies, but McDonald's sausage egg McMuffin, man, I had to have one of those every day.
Wow.
And now I have one maybe a couple times a month.
Yes.
I still like them, but I don't
Yes.
crave them.
Good. All right. So in the you probably have some nitrates in the sausage. You've got probably some malted barley flour in the egg McMuffin. The what do we call those things? The English tart, the English muffin. That tends to be made with barley malt. And then obviously chocolate is a big one also. Chocolate is very fermented.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's bitter, and that's why you have to add sugar to it to eat it. And whether it's organic, raw, or supposedly raw, it's a fermented product almost all the time. And so that's a big one. Vinegar, barley malt, malted barley flour, chocolate, pickles, aged cheese, alcohol. These are some of the biggest. And people tend to crave, Dennis, in a couple of categories. The most common are those who crave bread, chocolate, the nuts, the peanuts, almonds, cashews, Brazil nuts, the fruit, that's usually the apples, grapes, bananas, and the aged cheeses, the cheddar, Swiss, Parmesan cheese, blue cheese, things like that, and soy products also. There is another group of people who craves pickles and vinegar, or ketchup, or mustard. That group is even more severe as far as their symptoms than the first group. It's a smaller group, but it's a more severe group. And why do people crave these things? Well, it's not because Starbucks has nice advertising. The reason they crave them is that appetite is a liver function. So what you enjoy is chemically dictated by the liver. That's just a known medical fact. And so when fungus becomes too prominent in your liver, you become chemically influenced to seek fungal feeding foods, which means usually fermented foods and certain sugars. Now, table sugar, white sugar, is pretty low on the list, but malt sugar, maltose, malted barley flour, maltodextrin, like we find in Splenda, that's at the very top of the list. And so those are the things that are going to cause the biggest problem.